On December 20th, 1997, a moment of silence was held at the Camp Nou during Barca's match versus Atletico Madrid to honor a fallen fan. But instead of silence, there was chaos, not between Barca and Atleti fans or players or police, but instead fighting between Barcelona supporters themselves, which is one of many moments in a weird war that has been going on for decades. And today, we're going to learn about perhaps the most notable groups in that chaos, the Crazy Boys, or Boischwitz Neuss, to better understand the club's complicated history with these groups and its own supporters. And I'm gonna go to Barcelona to see if I can't document some of this myself, and to help you all better understand exactly what these groups are all about, and to see how it's still affecting the club today. All right. I've talked a lot about Barcelona on my channel for a long time now, and I've told a lot of stories, some of which get great reviews and others get some less great reviews, but I don't think I've ever been as worried as I am today to tell this story, because I do think there are some real dangers at discussing this group. For that reason, I'm just gonna try and tell a story today, tell about the history, and try to let you all make your own judgments on what you learn, because I think a lot of this history is not discussed enough. That being said, I think a good place to begin this discussion is trying to understand ultra culture in Europe. Back when football first became popular as a true spectator sport, fans showed up for some entertainment and to release the stresses of the work week by watching their boys play some ball. But over time, as the game grew, many clubs across the continent saw their supporters unite into smaller groups that would help represent the club in a more cohesive way. And whether it was by attending away matches or leading chants in the stadium and feeding the fandom of the culture, it helped grow each club. But when one group popped up in Barcelona in the early 1980s, it was all a bit different. Going by the name of Boischwitz Neuss, or Crazy Boys, a group of pretty young men, usually in their mid-teens, formed as one of these ultra groups for FC Barcelona. And in doing so, they committed to having this energy that you wouldn't be too surprised on based on their name. They were loud, inflammatory, and energetic in ways I think we have all seen young men be. And as time went on, the group grew rather quickly in those first few years to become the largest supporter group and main voice to be heard in the Camp Nou. But just because their numbers were up doesn't mean that they were very well received by opponents or even by other Barcelona fans. Because it seems like from the very start, their at times aggressive and intense nature brought about negative discourse from fans that thought otherwise than them. And it seems like that was the majority of Catalan fans in Barcelona. But just because they were the majority doesn't mean that they had the power. For the next few years, the Crazy Boys grew, and they took over an entire section of the Camp Nou. And with that power came more and more, I guess you could say, adventurous actions. They would insult opponents and they would fight a lot. One of the things they're most known for, and also what has gotten them in probably the most trouble, potentially. There was one major confrontation between the Crazy Boys and the Ultrasur, Real Madrid's extreme group, as extreme supporters group from that time, that led to a very large rivalry between the groups, and which I guess isn't surprising considering the history of the clubs, but that's just one of the many fights that has gone on. In 1985, a member of the boys was stabbed by a member of the ultra group of Barcelona's city rival, Espanyol, that sparked another major war with the group that would even lead to an attack that caused the passing of an Espanyol member, Frederic Rougier, in 1991. But before we get into more history of the group and the eventual, I guess you could say, demise, I went to Barcelona to try and find some remnants of this group today, because the truth is, a lot of that energy that they brought to the stadium once is desperately needed. A couple of years ago, Barcelona officially began working on the construction of a major renovation to the Camp Nou, meaning the club would be forced to play at the Estadi Olympique, a much smaller stadium, about half the size, with around 55,000 capacity, and much less convenient of a location for fans, and much more touristy location. And ever since, there has been a big issue with the atmosphere in the stadium, which I experienced firsthand when I went. The environment is just not really what you expect from a crazy big European night. Even when Barcelona beat Dortmund 4-0 in the Champions League, it was exciting and it was better than the league match I attended, but you could imagine a big game like that you'd probably not even be able to hear the away fans, but you could still catch a glimpse of what the Dortmund fans were saying pretty much every moment. And though that's not the best example, it is all made even worse by the fact that the club at the time was at war with the many ultra groups that still are around. And a lot of those groups are basically disguised versions of the Bourgeois noise.
Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. I like reading newspapers, but we can't always read newspapers, and sometimes we want to use our phones. But in foreign countries, it can be hard to do that, and that's where today's sponsor, Saily, comes in.
As you probably know, it can be an expensive headache to deal with your phone providers when going abroad, but Saily made it incredibly easy for me to hop off the plane in Barcelona and be good to go immediately.
And I'll be honest, I love it here, but I love Saily even more because I know I'll never be trapped here. I'll always be able to add more data, and I'll be able to do it from wherever I am and have it only activate once I land in that city.
All I had to do was download the app, and they had tons of options available worldwide for whatever country I was going to, so I could easily navigate to Spain, chose the plan I wanted, and then check out with code ROLU to get 15% off before quickly going to my settings, enabling the eSIM, and searching the web so I could search Spain as comfortably as I possibly could, knowing that I could add more data if needed with the click of a button. So if you are planning a trip abroad anytime in the near future, going to Barcelona, make sure you download Saily and use my exclusive code ROBBYLOU at checkout to grab yourself 15% off of an already great deal, and make sure you can explore as much as you want while you're away. Again, thank you for Saily for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to trying to understand why the atmosphere at the Estadio Olympique today is tied to what has gone on with the Ultras. For one, the Ultras aren't allowed at the stadium, as I said before, at least in the designated seats, the ones that you could see here right in front of me. Earlier this season, a couple of fans brought a rather racy and provocative sign, we're just gonna leave it at that for monetization reasons, to the Monaco away match. And those photos made it on social media, which led to UEFA taking action against Barcelona to the tune of 10 to 20,000 euros of a fine. Following this, the Barcelona president, Joan Laporta, told the ultra groups that they would be responsible for paying those fees, as they are all required to sign a contract with the club saying that they are responsible for the tifos, flares, and other choices made by that group. But rather unsurprisingly, they refused to play, as naturally, for the most part, clubs do take those charges themselves. But because of this touchy subject, and because the supporter groups hate Laporta, it was pretty clear what he was going to do. But as I said, that wasn't the first time Laporta had an issue with the groups. In fact, it's just the tip of the very deep iceberg there is, but the biggest takeaway for the club right now was that the atmosphere at the Montjuic has been rather tame, especially since those fans were banned, with most of the energy today coming from scattered cheers and rather unorganized exclamations often. And for a team that's been as exciting as they were this year, that's hard to hear, especially when you'd hope that finally being great again would completely change the atmosphere. But because the loudest fans, the ones that always led the parades before, celebrations after, and energy during the matches aren't around, well, it's not really again. But again, this banning of Barcelona fans of ultra groups isn't new for the club by any means. See, going back to 1990, when the Bourgeois were really gaining ground, their ideology and beliefs began to take much of a stronger turn toward a far-right pseudo-Spanish nationalist area. And without getting too deep into the politics of Barcelona and the club, that's basically the exact opposite of beliefs of many, dare I say most, people in Barcelona. So you can imagine that a group of young men already known for riling everybody up for good or for bad, that is now basically following a rather antagonist ideology to many other Barca fans, that could lead to a bit of a testy environment, and a boiling point for the fans would be met. And that day would come at the Camp Nou on December 20th, 1997. It was supposed to be just another big match between Atleti and Barca, with Luis Enrique leading the lines and Guardiola managing the midfield, but that wasn't the case. It was overshadowed by all of the fans. To start the game, it was announced on the screen that they would all take a moment of silence to remember a member of the supporters group who had passed away a few days earlier. A banner in the north end above where all the Bourgeois were sitting read, "Sergi, the Bourgeois will never forget you." But instead of that moment of silence being upheld, dissenting noise came from the opposing end of the pitch, but not from any away fans. instead from other Barca fans. See, it turns out Sergio Soto, the man who passed, was allegedly a far-right leaning activist from the city and had been arrested a few times because of his exclusionary and Spanish nationalist views. And chants along the lines of these out of the Camp Nou could be heard, which was followed by boisterous noise members spreading throughout the stadium and creating a bit of a panic among the rest of the fans, as a lot of the chants were coming from the Sang Culé, which is an anti-fascist and a very pro-independence group, basically the exact opposite of the boisterous. And though I've seen a lot of different reports on what exactly happened that night, it seemed like the boisterous noise spread out throughout the stadium and indiscriminately attacked whoever fans were around them because of the chants that they heard. And then afterwards, obviously, a lot of discussion came from it, and a lot of it focused on how the club allowed for this to go on, for the moment of silence to go on, with how controversial the man was. This all blew up in the press and became a very large debate, one that had been taking over Spain for decades and had now greatly influenced football in the city of Barcelona and had tainted the view of their ultras, one that I think the club has struggled to recover from today. In 2003, Joan Laporta was made president on a campaign basically solely focused on banning these groups and increasing security at the Camp Nou, so environments like this wouldn't happen. And he won because of that, because of the chaos that a lot of these groups, especially the boisterous noise, were creating. And when he was elected in 2003, he almost immediately banned the boisterous noise from the stadium forever. They didn't really stop them from going to the games, as a lot of the supporters groups that exist today are just descendants of those old groups where it is boisterous noise members, it just isn't that name of the group. But I do believe that the banning of the group saw decreased coverage, I guess, and maybe decreased actions of this far-right aggressive behavior, and with that came less focus on the objectively problematic beliefs and behaviors that they had. And I think it's things like that which have made them such a common topic online, which I often see people from all over the world complaining about them not being allowed in and how it's unfair, and even going so far as to say that they should be back. And maybe that has something to do with Fermin running with the flag around the stadium. It doesn't necessarily mean that he or those people online support the beliefs of the club or of that group. I mean, it might just be that he saw a flag of a group that's not allowed to be around anymore, and he remembered discussion about that, and you know, he wanted to show support for more Barcelona fans. It doesn't necessarily mean that he has the same beliefs as them just because he's holding up, or Messi held it up back in the day. But it is dangerous, I think, for this group to be gaining so much power on social media, when so many fans online, so many international viewers don't truly understand the history of the group and the club entirely. In the end, though, to me, it seems like their ousting from the Camp Nou has created a safer environment around FC Barcelona, and therefore likely a more appealing game to attend for the millions of tourists that have traveled to the city, which, you know, if you're a tourist like me, that's a good thing. If you're a Catalan member who doesn't want those tourists around, not necessarily a good thing. But that doesn't also mean that it's made the football environment any better or more exciting, and I don't really think that's the case at all. But maybe as the years go on and potentially generations go by, the passion of Barcelona's greatest supporters and most energetic supporters can show through together again in one of these supporters groups without the violence and hateful rhetoric that the boisterous noise objectively created, at least before. Let me know what you think. I tried to keep my opinions out of this because I want to be able to attend Barcelona games comfortably, and I wanted to give people the true history, or at least as true of a history as I could find online about this situation. Because every time I tried to talk to somebody in Barcelona about it, there was a lot of fear-mongering and lack of discussion about the topic. I think they were afraid, probably rightly so. Let me know what you think. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.